सहना ववतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहैः ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः हरि ओम श्री गुरुभ्यो नमः हरि ओम वसुदेवसुतं देवं कंसचाणूरमर्दनं देवकी परमानन्दं कृष्णं वन्दे जगद्गुरुं कृष्णं वन्दे जगद्गुरुं. So we are on verse 15 of chapter 5 of Bhagavad Gita. And I'm going to just, in a few sentences, summarize a little bit where we are at this point. So we know that Bhagwan advised Arjun that he should follow the Karma Yoga and perform his duties as worship to God, because this will purify his mind, and then go to the next stage of sadhana and, realize the Brahman. And he also mentioned that realized master lives without doership. That was one big main point. And then we saw those verses where, Bhagwan compared the body to a Navadvarapuri, and he said a realized master lives very happily in that Navadvarapuri. And then all actions seem to happen through BMI, but the Atma is neither doing anything nor propelling anyone to do anything. That's what we saw in the previous verses, if you remember. So let's see this verse now. And few more things I wanted to say. That Atma is the previously it was called Prabhu. Prabhu is like a master. And that master, and as we discussed, he neither does anything or not creates any condition for any jiva. And then we compared it to like a sun. The sun is there, and in their presence everything happens. So we have to look at it that way. So then the question is, how does it happen? And the another one more thing was that he doesn't, the karma sanyogam, he doesn't give a result of the action. But we do, if we are in that mode, if we still have doership and we do the karma, where does the result and all come from? Then the Sanskrit words was swabhavastu pravartante. So basically, everything happens according to the swabhava, means nature. So those are the points. And what is nature? Nature is a combination of sattva, rajas, and tamas. So these are very subtle points. And in Bhagavad Gita, they have relative standpoint, Krishna Bhagavan explains, and the highest standpoint, both. And sometimes it's hard for us to understand completely the highest point, but he's giving you anyway to contemplate, and slowly we will get there, So that's how we have to look at it. So now we'll go to verse 15. So this is kind of a summary of what happened earlier verses. So whoever has the book, I'm going to chant. Nadate kasyachit papam na chaiva sukrutam vibhuhu ajnanena vritam jnanam tena muhyanti jantavaha. Na is not, adate is takes. Kasyachit of anyone. Papam is demerit. Na is not. Cha is and, eva is even, sukrutam is merit. So actually, जैसे बोलते हैं ना पाप और पुण्य, those are the two words basically. Sukrutam is punya. Vibhu, the Lord. Or actual meaning we saw, vibhu means all pervading. Ajnanena, by ignorance. Avrutam, enveloped. Jnanam, we know knowledge. Tena is by this. Muhyanti, deluded. मोहित हो जाते हैं जो. Jantavaha, beings. तो जैसे जंतु से ये वर्ड आया है, मगर actually he is referring to all the living beings. That's another, I think one time Tejo Mehanji explained that, what it actually means, but here for us, good enough, they're living beings, including us. That's what it means. Okay. So, the first word I wanted to say was the Vibhu, which I kind of already mentioned. So there was a word Prabhu, and now it's Vibhu. Prabhu means like a lord or a master, boss, although, and Vibhu is the one that is all pervading. So it is not confined to my body alone. It pervades the entire cosmos. So that's how we have to look at it. Okay, and when we say entire cosmos, then we should think about as a substratum, origin of the world kind of thing. And when we talk about Atma, then we are referring to which is expressed through our body. But that, and when we talk about the entire cosmos, substratum of the cosmos, then it's Brahma. But actually, we have seen it's both are same, right? Just like the space. So those are the subtle points we should just remember, and also know that the same thing. I mean, not thing. What should I say? Same reality or substratum is my innermost being also. It's not like separate from me, because that's the kind of delusion we get, that is separate, but it's not. So now, there are two standpoints. One is a relative standpoint and one is a highest standpoint. So in these two verses, he's talking about the highest standpoint. So just stay in that little higher realm, then you will understand. So this is the issue. At the karma yoga level, we know that we have this notion of doership. So we are working from there, and that's why that karma phala and all those things we talk about, and that's okay, totally fine at that level. But here he's taking you to a slightly higher realm, not slightly, the highest realm actually. So let's look at how we feel generally. Don't we feel that जब हम लोग प्रार्थना करते हैं भगवान से, या कि मेरे जितने भी प्रॉब्लम्स हैं मैं आपके चरणों में अर्पित कर रही हूँ, वगैरह वगैरह, those kind of feelings we have. And also sometimes I say कि मेरे पुण्य भी मैं आपको सब दे देती हूँ, either पाप or punya. That's how we kind of try to have a relationship with Bhagwan, because we actually feel that Bhagwan is somebody different from me. That's why I kind of, to give something to somebody, that difference comes in, right? So, but here is a very powerful and strong revelation over here to us, which he has done it before also, but यहाँ और भी खोल के बता रहे हैं, सीधा बोल रहे हैं, that Vibhu does not take any papa or punya. So now उनको पाप से मतलब है ना पुण्य से, and we have seen कि how its electricity is neutral. If it passes through a heater, it will give you a heat. If it passes through a air conditioning, it will give you a cold air. So it's two opposite things. Electricity has nothing to do with any particular type of thing, I'm just kind of comparing. It's a pap, punya, the two opposites of it. But it just gives it the power to do it. So that's how we have to look at it. So then somebody might say, hey, what about the puja and all that, that we do? It's not that it doesn't have any role, because we are still at a lower level. So for us, it still has a value, because even in chapter 9, once we get there, that, Arjun's question was, hey, how do I worship you? And Krishna Bhagavan said, you can offer me, patram, pushpam, phalam, toyam. You can offer me a fruit, a flower. If you don't even have that, a leaf will do. Or you don't have anything, give me a little water. I'll accept it. So he said that. And then when we get over there, we'll say, what is the subtle points behind it? We will see that. I don't want to get into it too much. But basically, we know, हम लोग ये सब चढ़ाते हैं भगवान को. So that is okay, but that is at a lower level. And finally, we have to climb to this highest point, that where we have already learned that Atma is not a doer. It doesn't do anything. And if we stay in there, then we also actually are not the doer. Okay? That's why it's neither initiator of any action or nor receiving anything, because it's not the doer. So, and we have seen the space example. We have seen the sun example, right? Even space example we can take. That space, just think about space. It is just there. It's not participating in anything. But without space, we cannot exist. In a sense, it gives us accommodation. And no matter, neither you can cut the space, not you, literally you cannot even, you feel like I can't even touch the space, it's just there, right? And then even if some big blast happens and temporarily wo kala धुआं ये वो कुछ हो जाएगा, but those are air getting polluted for temporarily, वो भी, not permanently. But space को कुछ भी नहीं होता है. So as though space is not taking anything, it's just giving you accommodation. Same way that substratum gives you, that power, accommodation, whatever you want to call, but it itself doesn't take part in anything. Okay? So it was interesting that Dilli Wale Swami said something very interesting. That he said, when we have a strong sense of doership, that's when we also project doership on Bhagwan. And make him the karma phala data and things like that, So it depends on what level I am. If I have the doership, then I make him the doer also. If I rise above it, then I understand that he's not the doer. So I thought that was a very good point. So at a karma yoga level, this is accepted, no problem at all, because in there it does say that we should perform action as an offering to God. But that is a sadhana that we have to do to reach that next stage. Okay, that's all it is. In bhakti also, same thing. That samarpan and everything is there, and that's very important to purify our mind. So don't misunderstand this. And that is totally accepted at that stage. But when you transcend that stage, because we have seen that to really reach that highest state, we have discussed it many times, that you have to transcend your mind, body, intellect, everything. So he's talking about this transcendental state, the absolute truth. From that perspective, that there is no give and take over there, And this nature of highest nature is again and again revealed in Bhagavad Gita from the very beginning, starting from chapter 2 only. But as we go higher chapters, it will be revealed from a slightly different angle. So it will seep into us, more and more. One more very, very subtle point here. Let's think about it, that, okay, everything happens in nature. So when we say karma phala data, right? Result aata hai. If I am the doer, result aayega mere paas definitely. Simple example is, when I put my hand in the fire, it gets burnt. So result immediately aa gaya, right? It's not like somebody is coming and checking, this person put a hand in the fire, so isko jalna chahiye. Wahan koi third party maujud nahi hai. That everybody can understand. So that's how the law of nature instantly works. This is just an example. Other law of nature may take a little time to work, but that's also law of nature only. So that's what we have to bring it down to this. Hey, result आता है तो nature से आता है. कोई policeman वहाँ नहीं बैठा है. And वो दिल्ली वाले स्वामी जी बोले कि अगर policeman कोई third party होती ना तो सब escape कर जाते वो law से. He's saying जैसे कि कोई इधर तो इतना नहीं होता है. Everybody follows the law. India में like people will jump the red light, ये वो कोई police आएगा then they will stop. Otherwise they'll keep doing. So he's saying, but in law of nature you get pakka result because that is the law. And the other example he gave is, you throw a stone up in the air, it is going to come down because of the gravitational law. And if you throw straight up, it might come and hit on your head. And he's saying the person will look up and say, Kisne feka? तो कोई बैठा नहीं है वहाँ फेंकने के लिए. I thought that was very funny, but it gave a very powerful point that, hey, things happen in nature, results will come if you are at that level, and it will be instant or whatever, but it will come. So an absolute standpoint is Atma is neither doer nor enjoyer. Okay, so then the question is, okay, then the people who are performing action and they have this notion, where do they stand? So in this verse, it's explaining that they are at the level of ignorance. Okay, so ignorance is because of that ignorance we get the sense of doership. And ego is the same thing, right? Ego, when I feel I'm separate from Bhagwan, that's when the ego rises, and it's a state of ignorance. So then another very subtle point he mentioned was very interesting. That Swami from Delhi, he said that the it doesn't mean absence of knowledge actually, but wrong knowledge, faulty knowledge that we hang on to. And it's like he calls it like a notion about myself. What is the notion? Oh, I am such and such person. I'm a man, woman. I'm a Hindu. I'm a Muslim, because I'm identifying with my body, mind, and intellect. And that notion is actually ignorance. और कुछ नहीं है, वो ignorance है. And then how does that ignorance go away? We will see that it will go away through knowledge. That's the only way that the ignorance goes away, is it gets eliminated, is through knowledge. And so in that ignorance, what do I think? That's when I start thinking I'm a doer and God is a giver of result. And this, as we go a little bit, understand the knowledge, and our mind gets pure, and as it gets purer and purer and purer, I transcend, and then I realize that the God is no different than me. Because that's why that usually when we are at a lower level in the ignorance or partial ignorance or something, we think that God is somebody different. That's why he becomes a giver of result. But if it's me, myself, then at that level, the give and take is not there. So what is happening is that this knowledge about myself is covered by ignorance, and that he uses the word muhyanti, means that it deludes all being. Delusion mein aa jata hai, you know. And the perfect example, very simple one that everybody will understand. There is a normal person, very intelligent, and he drinks too much one day, get intoxicated. So he's saying that in intoxication, it's not like he doesn't have the intelligence and wisdom. What happened when he is intoxicated? His wisdom got covered. And then when after a while, जब उसका नशा उतरेगा, वो sober हो जाएगा, तो अपने आप wisdom वापस आता है. Then he might say, oh my God, how I acted like an idiot, why did I do this, but whatever. But at that moment, he doesn't know. So the same way, same example, you can see that this jantava, he said the word, means all the living beings, they are deluded, and their wisdom is covered by ignorance. And that's in that ignorance, I think all these things are okay, doership and result and this and that as though Ishwar is doing, but actually nature is doing. So then he also again emphasized that, hey, at a lower level, when it's like elementary classes, it's totally fine, but later on you have to learn the absolute truth. So it's a journey that we take. And another example he gave was very good one, I thought. He's saying that like we solve an algebra problem. So we take a value of x, some problem is given, so we say x equal to so and so. In the end, जब पूरा एक problem solve हो जाता है, तो हम x को drop कर देते हैं. Like, there's some simple thing that if I eat 2 mango every day in 1 month, how many mangoes I will eat? Something. I'm just saying a silly example. But then we put a x equal to this and this. How we used to make that formula? But in the end, you drop that x. So that's how it is, that in the beginning, it's fine, all this karma phala and all that. But in the end, you got to drop it. And then once I get that supreme knowledge, and that's when I'm going to understand that I'm not the doer or not the initiator. And so the conclusion over here is mainly the 3-4 points of this verse is that vibhu or that substratum does not take anybody's pap or punya, but most of the people are performing their action in ignorance, and the knowledge is covered by the ignorance, and all being are deluded thinking that I'm the doer. That's what this verse is. And in the next one, we are going to see that what happens to a wise person who has followed the Karma Yoga, mind get purified, and he is in the higher state. How does his ignorance go away? That we will see in the next one. But this one, he's just telling you that how we get deluded. Any question? Question or comment? Okay. Any volunteers to read? Whoever has a blue book. मीरा जी, आज आप पढ़ना चाहेंगी?
Sure. My pleasure. The Lord takes neither the demerit nor even the merit of any. Knowledge is enveloped by ignorance. Thereby, beings are deluded. The Supreme, who is all-pervading, Vibhu, contrary to all our Puranika concepts of stock-taking gods and deities, is declared here as not taking any note of the merit or the demerit of the living creatures. It is such passages that shock the story-reading devotee class, and therefore they generally ignore the Geeta and read the glories of Krishna. The concept that God sits just over the clouds, peeping down and observing every sin and merit of all the people all over the world, and that he keeps a perfect account of all these, so that on the day of judgment, each one will approach the Father who will pass the judgment, is a concept which can appeal only to simple folk in whom the intellect is the least developed faculty.
Swamiji is very strong in his comment. But he's just trying to shake us up कि अभी बहुत हो गया elementary, अभी थोड़ा ऊपर उठो. Like he's pushing us. Yeah, okay.
The eternal principle underlying life's activities cannot be conceived of as taking any active note or interest in the created or in the finite. From the infinite standpoint, the finite exists not. It is only when the Supreme comes to function through its own self-forgetfulness that it comes to see itself split up into the concepts of agent, action, fruit, and so on. Sunlight passing through a plain glass, in spite of the medium through which it has passed, emerges out in its pure nature if the glass is clean, flawless, and colorless. If, on the other hand, a pencil of ray were to pass through a glass prism, we all know now it would emerge out in its 7 component colors, constituting the spectrum. Similarly, the self passing through knowledge, Gyan, emerges out as a self, which is the one without a second, all-pervading, all-perfect. But the same self, when it passes through ignorance, meaning the body, mind, and intellect, it splits up into the endless world of plurality.
I think that's absolutely a brilliant example, right?
I think so.
So it is such a brilliant example because we have, coming back to Kathopanishad for a minute over here, that we were talking about that charioteer being the intellect, right?
Yeah.
If the intellect has no impurities in it, then it's like God shining through it. Because it's like a glass which is completely transparent, which has no impurities in it. The sun you can look at it exactly the way it is, right? But the moment it has impurities, firstly you won't be able to see. And the sun ray ka example jo उन्होंने दिया, a clear glass ke through, it will be exactly like this, जैसे sun ray होती है. मगर if it is a prism, it will break it into 7 different colors. Just and our mind के प्रिज्म से वो हमारी वासना and हमारी टेंडेंसी के थ्रू जब आता है तो सब कुछ डिल्यूजन से बाहर निकलता है वो. That's what it's the same power, same consciousness, but it will behave as though in 2 different ways. Sunlight को वैसे कुछ हुआ नहीं है, right? It is as pure, sun is as pure, but it appears that way. That's how we have to look at it. This is absolutely brilliant example, which is, we would say, how can this happen now? He's telling you a worldly example, which everybody can understand.
The relationship between knowledge and ignorance is very beautifully explained here. Ignorance cannot be knowledge, nor can knowledge be a part of ignorance. Where ignorance is, there knowledge cannot be. Where knowledge has come, ignorance must depart. But here we are told knowledge is enveloped by ignorance, just as the solitary light in a dark jungle, seen from a distance, can be described as a light engaged in darkness. This relationship and the method of stripping knowledge naked is more elaborately indicated in the following stanza.
So coming back to now this example also, it kind of completes the whole thing, that it's like I think the better example would be water. Water originally is all clean, but then उसमें dirt आ जाता है तो वो गंदा हो जाता है पानी, as though the clean water is covered. Or other example, that's even better. If we see a lake, right? Suppose lake is totally clear, then we can see the substratum, means the bottom of the lake. But उस पे अगर गंदगी आ गई तो then and the पानी is moving and all that, we don't see. Suppose एक thick काई जम गई उसके ऊपर, algae जम गई ऊपर, तो कुछ भी नहीं दिखाई देगा. Does that mean substratum is not there? No, it's there, but I just cannot see it. So the same way, when we have all this calm, krodh, lobh, moh, mad, matsarya in our mind, it deludes us and we cannot see, like the consciousness shining through. As it gets out, it just gets revealed by itself. It's not like, and he's going to explain in that, you have another paragraph there, right? Connecting the
yes,
two.
Yes.
Yeah, read that because that explains it. Yeah.
Yeah. The unveiling of truth is a process of the removal of ignorance and not a creation of knowledge. Therefore, it is only an act of rediscovery and not a creative achievement. This is amply brought out by Vyasa's words in the following, and that leads to the next stanza.
Yeah. So you see how he explained that you're not creating knowledge, it's just revealing itself because you're just removing the ignorance. जैसे वो algae को हटा दिया उसमें से and वो पानी clean होके, then I can see the substratum. That's all. So it reveals itself as though, that's what we have to say. Because sometimes, we say, oh, हमको शास्त्र पढ़ने से knowledge मिल जाएगी. Knowledge is going to take place in us only. But शास्त्र पढ़ने वगैरह से mind purify होता है. ये नहीं कि कुछ हम लोग knowledge को भर रहे हैं उसमें. Because, that's how we think that, because the worldly चीज में, information भर रहे हैं हमारी दिमाग में. That's all it is. But what the kind of knowledge they are talking about, that is more like removal of ignorance. So that's how we have to. It's a slightly subtle and technical way of looking at it, but these examples make it easier to understand what they're saying. Any comment, question, or anybody wants to add anything? Okay. The class is getting more and more quiet now.
I think it is very clear, so I don't think there are any questions. Maybe that's why.
Yeah, I think that Swamiji Chinmayananji gave amazing examples, and that, very good.
And you added to those examples also, so that clarified the whole thing.
Great, okay. So we can go to the next one.
Yeah.
Verse 16. ज्ञानेन तु तत् ज्ञानं येषां नाशितमात्मनः तेषामादित्यवज्ञानं प्रकाशयति तत्परम्. Jnanena is by wisdom, tu is but, tat is that, ajnanam, ignorance. Yesham, whose nashitam is destroyed, atmanaha of the self. Tesham is there, adityavat, like the sun. Jnanam, knowledge. Prakashayati, reveals. Tat param, the highest. So, what he's saying over here, that the people whose ignorance is destroyed by the knowledge of the self and the sun, he's comparing this to the sun, and let me tell you other some important points and then we'll get to it. First main thing is that the wrong notion is eliminated by right understanding. So this is something that happens in our own mind that is going to happen. And the only way to remove ignorance is that I remove my faulty understanding, that I'm not the body and I'm not the doer. By action, actually it cannot be removed. That's why they said the karma, it just purifies the mind. It doesn't actually give you the knowledge. In some ways, when you remember that we talked about in a different way, that you can only prepare yourself and then the God decides when to, but we said God decides, but basically क्या है कि जैसे जैसे ignorance remove होता जाता है, वो clear होता जाता है, and finally the whole substratum is revealed, right? So that is what actually happens, but you can present it that way if you want to, that hey, all I can do is just keep purifying my mind. In the end, Bhagwan will reveal himself. But it's almost like a given thing that once you remove that, it will automatically come. And also it can tell you, and the example that he gave about hey, you cannot remove it by action, Dilliwale Swami gave a very brilliant example. He's saying like you have a dark room, and अब मैं उसमें से ना darkness निकालना चाहती हूँ उस room में से. I cannot take a झाड़ू and sweep the darkness out. That's not going to happen. No matter whole day I can do it, it's not going to happen. I'm pushing the wrong button. All I have to do is bring light. Means, bring knowledge. Light you can, the moment knowledge comes, darkness अपने आप भाग जाएगी, So here the ignorance is connected with wrong notion. Remember we talked about in the previous one, that scriptures are telling us that you are that Brahman, you're that substratum. So he actually made a very good point. He's saying we chant very nicely, and he was talking about that Nirvana Shatkam, that Chidananda Rupa Shivoham Shivam, Mano Buddhi Ahankar Chittani Naham, and all this is such a beautiful thing, and we chanted also. He's saying hum chant to kar lete hain, lekin we still hold on to the notion that I am the limited. Hum bol denge Shivoham and all that everything. But we are so strongly embedded in this, my own ego, doership and all that it's very, very hard to get out. And he was explaining that suppose if somebody is dreaming, just a hypothetical example he gave, but it will make a point. He's saying that suppose somebody is dreaming that, this person was actually a king. A king start dreaming that he's become a beggar. Okay? And he's saying, you enter that dream, and you tell him, hey, Baba, you are not the beggar. So, when you go there, he will keep asking you, ₹1 de do, ₹2 de do, or $1 de do, $2. And say, hey, Baba, you are not, but he won't listen to you. Why? Because his experience is like that right now. His experience is as though he's a beggar. So he's saying that with some trick or something, somehow you are able to shake him up, or वो उसको एक झापड़ मारा, कुछ भी किया और वो डर के उठ गया. तो जब वो उठ जाएगा ना, तब उसको पता चलेगा, oh, I am actually the king. But जब उसको पता चलेगा I'm a king, तो उसकी पूरा ड्रीम भाग जाएगा उसका, including you who had entered the dream. And then he will think, oh, it's me only who had become everything. The beggar and my bowl, begging bowl, and the person who came to wake me up as a guru. So even a guru is at that realm over here, one who's trying to wake you up. All of that merges into that. So some nice example to contemplate upon. So all they are telling you, the saints and sages, that whatever you are experiencing is not real. We may not believe it, but that's a fact. Okay, we may not believe it because our experience is telling us something else. So this world is an illusion or delusion, whatever you want to call it. Delusion actually happens in the head, and illusion is when you see something outside. This is dispelled by knowledge. And how do we do that? By contemplating on what scriptures are telling. and we slowly come to know about it. And the other point is that we discussed already, that ignorance is in my intellect actually. So the knowledge will also get revealed over there only. Okay. And knowledge is the one that will negate the ignorance, and the real self will shine forth. And we saw, you know, and the famous example that everybody knows now is a rope and the snake. Because what happened was that the darkness created that illusion. There was not enough light in the room or outside, suppose, whichever way you want to look at it, that created that illusion. And then one point that Vedanta says, like sometimes we have that question, when did I become deluded? And Vedanta actually doesn't go in that thing. Say, we don't know, beginningless bol diya usko. Agyan is beginningless. And the way you have to think of the example is, एक cave है एकदम deep धरती में, but we can go there suppose. उसमें बिल्कुल sunlight नहीं आती है, एकदम dark है. तो वो कब से dark है? जब से धरती आई तब से dark है. ये example सबको समझ में आता है, right? Now I take a light and go there. वो darkness एक second में भाग गया. It was there from beginningless time, right? So he's saying that don't worry about when the ignorance started, that's not important. But how to get out of this, that is more important. So don't get into the question, when did the first problem arise? Vedanta don't want to mess with that. So they called it beginningless. So the technique to come out is knowledge of the self. And he gave another example that was kind of interesting, and I don't know if you will connect to it, but I'll say it anyway. That he said that suppose there is a person and he decides to take a Maun Vrat. So I'm not going to talk today. And somebody comes and say, and this is says Mr. Sharma. His name is Mr. Sharma, and he says, I'm not going to talk today. Somebody comes and says, who are you? So he don't want to talk. So he wrote in a book, I am Mr. Sharma. So the person who is reading looks at the book and reads it, and he thinks that a book is Mr. Sharma. Because book pe likha hua hai na. So it's like something like that has happened to us, that, that my identity, I start thinking it's right here in my body, mind. And I thought that was a very good example he gave, And so, how does this knowledge shines forth when we are, we want to eliminate ignorance and we contemplate on the whatever scripture is saying? So Bhagwan actually gives a very beautiful example here. He says that when the sun comes out, it illumines the whole world, correct? Do we need another light to look at the sun? We don't. Because the sunlight itself reveals the sun. So this is a slightly another, subtle point, that to see the sun, we don't need any other light, but to see anything else, we need the sunlight. See how it is? So the same way, the consciousness is knowledge itself. It is that gives power to the knowledge. So that's why it will reveal itself to you. And this is another point again and again mentioned in Bhagavad Gita in all different ways. And just think about it. And sun's example is the most brilliant one. That when the sun comes out, we don't need any other light to see the sun. In sunlight only we see the sun. Same way, this knowledge, in the light of the same knowledge, this whole substratum or the consciousness is revealed. Or we become conscious of consciousness. Whichever way you want to look at it. So, basically what the process is, that by reading Bhagavad Gita and slowly becoming firm in the knowledge that they are talking about, the misunderstanding in our head keep getting removed, mind becomes quiet, and the self gets revealed. Okay? And so he's saying this is a kind of a great phenomena that we have to think about. And what is knowledge and how it's going to reveal and all, it will be the next verse, but we will do it next time. We finished a little bit early, but that's okay. we can have some discussion or something. Oh, we have to read also. Yes, I forgot about that. Yeah. Meena, do you want to read? And any question before we go in reading?
No, I was thinking, they say ignorance and Atma or consciousness, they're beginningless, but ignorance can end, whereas that is infinite.
Right. Yes. And other example that they give you is, suppose you learn a new language. So you can say, I was ignorant of the language from the very beginning. But once you know it, then you can't go back to it. Ignorance, right?
Right, that's it.
एक बार किसी को पढ़ना लिखना आ गया और अब उसको तू वापस अनपढ़ बन जा. Right? It's not possible. The moment you see, you will start reading. The words will start boom, boom, boom. So worldly example also fit in what they are saying.
Yeah.
But I think that sometimes human mind when people get stuck at their intellect level, then they keep saying, "Ye kab hua? When was the first time it happened?" And they say, "Don't worry about it." And I don't know if you have heard of that very famous and drishtant, that one scientist and one sadhu was standing under a tree. You guys have heard of that? And a snake fell. No? Okay. Here it is. So एक जंगल में ना एक साइंटिस्ट और एक साधु खड़े थे, they were conversing, and एक सांप गिरा नीचे. तो वो साइंटिस्ट जो था ना, वो ये कौन सा सांप है, इसका कलर क्या है, इसकी जाति क्या है, इसका फलाना क्या है, ये वो सो क्यूरियस, और वो आगे आगे जा रहा है टू फाइंड आउट. और जो साधु है ना, वो दूर जाके खड़ा हो गया. सो क्यों? बिकॉज सांप काटेगा. It's more important I get away from the सांप than to worry about that, what it is and how it is, when did it come. And उसको सांप ने साइंटिस्ट को काट लिया. तो फिर वो साधु ने बोला कि अरे, why don't you use your wisdom and get out of? So he's saying, संसार कब आया, कैसे बना, क्या हुआ? Why are you worried about that? Get out of it and be happy. It's a simple dristant, but I absolutely love it. So that's what it is, the ignorance and knowledge.
Well, somebody gave an example of a fire. If there's a fire going on and one person is saying, now how did this happen? Why did it happen? Yeah. Where was it? And the other person says, let's first extinguish the fire before we think of how and why and where.
Yeah.
What happened.
And the funny thing is that, I think it was Sarva Priyananji who said, or he was telling how Vivekanand was explaining that once you have the wisdom, all questions go away anyway. There are no questions left. So the questions are only on ignorance side.
Yes. Yeah.
That's another thing. Very interesting. Yeah.
And then the other point was that, we talked about the dream and how he comes in there. They're two completely different states. The dream state and the waking state. Once you're in the waking state, you don't go back. You cannot relate even to the others.
And what difference it makes whether you had a great dream, if you really analyze, or you had a nightmare. Both are false.
Right.
But we have a very hard time accepting that in this life. कुछ अच्छा होता है तो हम लोग बहुत खुश होते हैं, कुछ बुरा होता है तो हम लोग कितना दुखी हो जाते हैं. पर अगर if we actually follow, so then you should be some bhav in both if you have that knowledge. Truly, if you're established.
Right.
That's exactly.
But the realization also is another. Would you call that another state when you realize?
Yes, it is. It is called another state, because it's the same like what you said. One is a dreaming state, and there is no entry together. You cannot be together in both.
You can enter, right.
Yeah.
Right.
So either you are ignorant but there is a journey that you take, and somebody was talking about this, something called a lucid dream. Have you heard of the word lucid dream?
I've heard of it, but
So this person was explaining that people whose mind start getting a little pure, sometimes they will see a lucid dream, means you are half awake and half dreaming, and you kind of know it, that it's a dream. I don't know too much about that.
That can happen.
Yes. so slowly that वो ऐसे पार करके then you can maybe I don't know. So as your mind gets purer and purer, it's possible to get that lucid dream. Somebody was saying. Interesting.
All right, I'll read. But to those whose ignorance is destroyed by the knowledge of the self, like the sun, to them knowledge reveals the supreme Brahman. In the case of finite mortals, sighing and sobbing in ignorance, the self is screened off from them by lifeless walls of nescience avidya. The man of realization is one in whom knowledge has lifted this veil of ignorance. Darkness is removed by light, not by degrees, but instantaneously, however old the darkness may be and however thick its density. Similarly, in one who has knowledge, jnana, of the self, the beginningless ignorance is lifted, and within a lightning flash, his ignorance ends. Ignorance creates the egocentric concept, and the ego thrives in the body, mind, and intellect. With the end of ignorance, the ego too ends.
So Swamiji has taken, a different angle, but is he telling exactly the same thing? But he's explained it very nicely. He's just talking about when that knowledge actually reveals itself, it happens very quickly, and this